Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Centric. This being a show, we're talking about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Bull. Very interesting case this week where we have a lady named Tally, who is accused of killing her brother. Now, what makes this case very interesting and very personal, which kind of had quite a few back-to-back personal cases like this, is the fact is that Bull and Tally have a connection. He was actually her psychologist or therapist, whichever one. I'm not really sure. Is there a distinction between a therapist and a psychologist? Isn't that kind of the same thing? I don't know. I'm sure there's probably like technical differences and stuff like that, but nevertheless, he actually looked after her a while back. But apparently it's been like 12 years since they last saw each other. But, and it seems like things weren't always, things didn't end well in the sense of that Bull left. So there's a little contempt there. But Tally's situation is a little interesting. What makes this case very interesting is the fact is that she has antisocial personality disorder. Basically, she lacks empathy and really cause basically how Marissa ended up explaining it later on, it seems like she can only feel emotions when they're pertaining to her. Like she's very it's kind of her condition is basically she's very self-involved. The only feelings that matter, the only thing that really matters is herself. Emotions connected to her. If it's connections between other people, she doesn't really feel that. So basically with the way the crime scene was set up, her being the only one there, it never came up during the trial and everything like that, but obviously the recording of when she called in a crime and everything, she puts on a fake face and then she immediately kind of goes back to being okay, everything's good. That's why I was kind of okay, so is this supposed to be she did do it, and Bull and them are looking after trying to help a guilty person get a non-guilty verdict, but it's no, it's just the fact is, she feel like that was probably the only way she'd get a response. She ends up talking about it later on, but she quickly learned growing up that that's what people wanted. It's this type of response will get me what I want, and it's also what other people need, because she's kind of an oddball. Because it's kind of interesting, that whole aspect of her taking a stand at one point, because obviously it's the way things are, it doesn't really look good, because Bull told her the whole aspect, because she goes through few stakes and stuff like that, so she has a whole memory loss situation of okay, so draw it out to kind of try and piece together it, to kind of unlock your memories. It's do something visual to kind of draw out your subconscious to kind of bring forth your memories. And she ended up drawing stuff that she knows for a fact, and that's stuff that's come up in the courtroom, and she was hoping to kind of work backwards from her brother's murder to try and figure out the time that she lost. And it's nope, it just makes her look guilty, so Bull kind of messed her over on that front. But I'm also skipping over the fact is that there's the whole interesting aspect of initially they were trying this case as being they were going with a defense of a claim of insanity, but they quickly switched that over to being oh no, to not guilty, which is interesting, because the judge was honestly, you can do that. I just wouldn't recommend you do it, just because you confused the jury on where you stand in this whole situation. So it make it look a little contradictory, because it's oh, you said one thing and now you're contradicting yourself by saying another. But it's because when it came to Tally's brother Torrin's murder, whoever it was that killed him tried to save him, and then it's oh, and she doesn't have the empathy to even care about that. If she had did it, she wouldn't have tried to save him. So that's what made Bull decide to shift his opinion on the situation. She even demonstrated that whole aspect of her not caring on the stand, because they're Benny asked her, it's are you sad that your brother's dead? And she's no. And in fact, the matter is, everyone is kind of whoa, that's crazy. And then I love the whole situation of Marissa being Bull, are you sure about this? He's sure, no, but more we don't have much of a choice. And then later on, when things kind of worked out, she's oh my God, look at all this green. And he's yeah, see, why are you so shocked? I told you, sure, that it'd work out. It's nice. But she even showed them on the stand her faking crying, and just because yeah, I knew that's how people wanted me to act. And it's kind of interesting, because from her perspective, it's I know, she recognizes, yeah, I'm broken, I'm weird, I'm different, because the fact of the matter is no one else in the world is like that. It's kind of, a little lonely going every day throughout life living like this, because no one else is like me. So, but at the same time for her, it's yeah, but I wouldn't kill my brother, because my brother loved me. Even if I couldn't love him back, he still loved me. And why would I get rid of that? Which obviously later on you can be like, well, the ADA or DA kind of pointed out like, yeah, but the fact is you literally just showed us that you can lie at any point in time. Why would we believe you? Because anything you say, it could just be you trying to say what we want to hear, which is like a good point. But also you could also see the other point of like, yeah, what reason would she have to, kill her brother in the means that she did, just because it's like he is like the only, because I guess it's also that selfish thing of like, yeah, I only focus on what's important to me. Like having that connection to someone doesn't really matter to me, but what matters is the fact is my brother loves me. And I guess that kind of potentially falls in that self-centered aspect of it. So, and it's because it's also interesting because they kept using the word sociopath because her whole condition, at least within the confines of the show, they're kind of making comparisons of being like, oh yeah, like she is what would be in the past clinically defined as a sociopath. Because another aspect of this too is like the whole situation with her brother, that he wanted to kind of take guardianship of her and kind of get her, institutionalized in a facility, just because it's like, well, and it's something the dude Blake was talking about, which we'll get to him in a second, in the sense of like everything he did was trying to protect his sister because he loved her, and, probably felt like he probably wasn't the one to adequately get her the help she needed. And so obviously that's why she got pissed at the party and held him in such resentment, because it's kind of like, oh yeah, you're trying to send me off there, just because it's, she's kind of, dealt with stuff like that all her life. So just for her, it probably made her, a little upset, because it's just kind of like, you don't get to make decisions like that for me. But it turns out the one behind this was Blake, the one that was up there on the stand talking about how, oh yeah, this brother and sister, this and that. He even tried to he kind of took a misstep on the stand, and then he tries to pull it back. And I was like, oh, Blake's kind of a cool dude. He's the one that was even kind of like, hey, trying to calm things down when things were kind of weird and awkward at the party when, she was smashing bottles. And then it turns to the whole thing of like, yeah, apparently he had bought, roofies and was trying to rape Tally, so automatically shows how much of a piece of shit he is. And that's what the whole situation ended up being. He tried to do that, and Torrin came in and tried to stop him and ended up dying because of it. And, hence, it's kind of interesting, and that's kind of the whole point that Benny kind of pointed out during his closing statement, is like, you have someone who can't feel anything, has empathy. Like in your mind, you have this preconceived notion of what a sociopath is. And it's like, in this case, you kind of have to ignore that. Well, also recognizing it, because it's like her condition makes it so like, yeah, because like no one on the prosecutor's side actually had any evidence actually saying she did it. They're trying to say this and this kind of leads to her doing it, but it's like, oh, all the evidence that was presented by Tact, by Benny and Bull, kind of show like, hey, that all this like evidence, like all the situation, all kind of points to Blake now and not even to Tally. And I thought that was just kind of an interesting thing, because like I said, it's just like you have to kind of remove your preconceived notions of a sociopath to recognize like, yeah, none of the evidence, nothing that was presented by the prosecutor was like, yep, definitively Tally did it, just because it was all kind of like there's no fingerprints on the scissors or anything like that. So crazy turn of events that luckily in the end ends with a not guilty verdict. So I love there was also a moment earlier I thought was kind of a little funny, where Bull, like things weren't kind of going their way. Bull kind of reaches over and tries to give her a pat on the shoulder, but then like you see that she kind of turns towards him, and Bull kind of just lifts his hands, kind of like, oh, okay, I won't do that. But yeah, when they're leaving the courtroom, Bull suggesting that he picks up like, where Torrin had left off, of trying to get her into a facility. It's like, this is what your brother wanted you to kind of at least get back to some normal state of not feeling. And then she kind of talks about like, I understand why you left, and she kind of tears up a little bit and hugs him. I was like, wait, is she really? And then it's kind of like, nah, I'm just messing with them. Like, man, that's mean and messed up. Because that was something I was worried about was going to come up in her case and was going to complicate things. It was kind of be like, oh, I mean, I didn't think it was going to be a whole full misdiagnosed thing, but I was thinking like, oh, maybe she'll develop something. But I don't think empathy is something you can just develop like that. That's the whole point of like, her doing what she does because she's trying to fake it. So, but the whole thing was I was worried that like what we'd end up finding out like during court, she'll tear up or something. And then it's like, oh man, she does care about her brother. And that kind of screws over the case a little bit, especially because they went from like, oh, to plea of insanity to not guilty. So I thought that was just kind of an interesting thing. So, but that wasn't the only things that came up this episode. Another interesting thing that came up is the whole Danny and Gabriel situation. Turns out that's kind of a thing. Probably has been for a while, probably a little bit after Cable's funeral and everything. Which I had a feeling about, but I just wasn't 100% sure. And it's like, oh yeah, it's totally a thing. Danny's just trying to keep things super casual, but it seems like, Gabriel wants more. You can definitely get that inkling. Like, obviously, he's like, oh, yeah, here's a key. And she's like, wait, what? Yeah, it's a key to this place. He's like, no, just in case you want to stop by, you need something in case of an emergency, like someone needs to come in to fix something. It's like, hey, you got a key. We're friends, right? And it's kind of awkward and stuff. Which in itself is just kind of interesting what that whole situation is, because because even Danny brings it up with like, yeah, spending time here is a little weird and awkward because it's like, yeah, it's the building that Cable lived in, not necessarily the room she obviously the place she was renting, but obviously the building in which she was renting an apartment. It was kind of a little weird, but at the same time you're like, yeah, that's probably just Danny making excuses just because like, I don't know, maybe relationships though. Well, there was that FBI person that she had close ties to. I think they were partners. The last time we saw him wasn't that last season? Yeah, last season during the whole Cable situation, or when she did some illegal stuff hacking into the FBI files, and that ended with ultimately her getting fired from TAC, that whole situation. So I think that was the last time we saw that dude. It's his name Harrison. There seemed like there might have been something between him and Danny, which maybe that kind of died off after that Cable situation, because she turned to Harrison in that time, and it's just kind of like, oh, he betrayed her in that regard some. But more so, it's probably just it's also just kind of like, hey, we're having fun. Why complicate things by taking things too far? It's just kind of like, hey, let's just kind of enjoy things as they are. So, because, Danny's got her other priorities, and for him, it's just little things too, like the whole like, oh, he pays only in cash, he doesn't use a card or anything. Like Danny kept pressuring him about that whole situation, and he kind of jokes about it and changes the subject. But I'm like, what is that about? Like, is that supposed to mean something? Are we going to end up finding out that Gabriel's actually like filthy rich, but he doesn't want to use a card or anything because he doesn't want to let anyone know like how filthy rich he is or something like that? That this is him trying to make it on his own? Is that potentially what it is, or is it just because hopefully we don't have like a Kyle situation? I don't think we do, but maybe it's just kind of like, oh, he's not as, okay or as well off as he probably make it seem like he is. I don't know. I'm just curious to see what that ultimately ends up being. Also, like, where him and Danny is going to stand going forward. Like I said, because it seems like he wants more from this than maybe she does. But it also seems like she kind of goes beyond just simply enjoying it, that it speaks to her in some shape or form, Maybe it's just kind of nice closure after the whole like Cable situation of like, yeah, this is a connection to Cable kind of keeping her alive in some shape or form. Maybe you can, I guess, just kind of messed up to kind of think of it and kind of bring it down to that level, but still. Either way, we'll just have to wait to see what goes down in the next episode about all of that, to see if what that potentially can turn into or what comes about because of it. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this video. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.